I'm Danielle Boyd. I'm 34. And last March, I walked into my great-grandmother's library and found 217 empty shelves. My 10-year-old daughter was still in the car finishing a turkey sandwich because I'd told her to wait while I grabbed something quickly. I didn't grab anything. There was nothing left to grab. The room smelled the way it always had. Paper, leather, beeswax polish. My parents had sold every book my great-grandmother left to my dollars, and a popcorn machine shaped like a fire hydrant. But 9 days didn't involve a single raised voice, but it cost my parents the house they'd lived in for 31 years. And when I finally said the sentence that made my mother's coffee mug slip from her hand, 3 of the neighbors were recording on their phones. Welcome back to Dark Lily Stories. This is where we tell the quiet kind of revenge. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't break dishes, and doesn't make you the villain. If you've ever had family treat inheritance like household clutter, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe so the next one finds you. Before I tell you what they did, let me tell you about Cordelia. Cordelia Ann Boyd was my great-grandmother. She was the first woman in our family to attend College Wellesley, class of 1956, English literature, and the last person in the Boyd line who believed books were sacred objects. She inherited a modest fortune from the goldsmith side of the family, sold the jewelry business in 1981, and spent the next 27 years buying first editions of children's literature. Random illustrations, Caldecott Medal winners from the 1930s, a Kelmcott Chaucer printed in 1896 on handmade linen paper. 3 handwritten letters from Beatrix Potter discussing the illustrations for the tale of Jemima Puddle Duck. 217 items total catalogued, appraised, and shelved in the East Wing Library of the family house in Whitfield, Vermont. In 2008, at 81 years old, Cordelia established the Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation, a 501c3, tax-exempt, federally registered, filed with the Vermont Secretary of State. The books were formally transferred to the foundation and placed on what's called a permanent loan. They stayed inside the family house, and in exchange the house received a conditional tax exemption. That exemption saved roughly $30,000 a year in property taxes. The deal had one condition: the book stayed in the house unsold and passed to the next direct line descendant. In 2 years before she died, Cordelia added a final amendment. She named my daughter Ivy as the sole beneficiary. Ivy was 6. Cordelia sat her in the mahogany reading chair by the south window, opened a green leather copy of The Wind in the Willows, 198 Arthur Rackham illustrations, gilt-stamped spine, and said, "These are yours now, sweetheart." On the inside front cover was Cordelia's bookplate, hand-engraved Art Nouveau with a line in her handwriting underneath. "For Ivy, who will keep them safe." Ivy touched that line every time she opened a book. It was her ritual. She never skipped it. My mother had been circling the collection for 14 months. It started small. A comment at Thanksgiving dinner, November 2024, while Ivy sat 3 chairs away eating cranberry sauce with a fork. "Those books are just collecting dust in that creepy old room." I remember the exact moment because Ivy looked up from her plate, held my mother's gaze for 2 full seconds, then went back to eating without a word. My daughter was 9. She already knew what my mother was doing. After Thanksgiving, the comments came monthly. "Honey, have you thought about what to do with all those old books? Vanessa's boys would love that library room someday. They could turn it into a playroom. Your father's knees can't handle the East Wing stairs anymore. Maybe we should renovate." I gave the same answer every time. "They're not mine, Mom. They're on permanent loan to Ivy." And my mother always gave the same smile, the tight one, the one that meant she'd heard me and decided I was wrong. Cordelia and her permanent things. Here's what I didn't understand until it was too late. My mother's fixation on the books wasn't about money. It was about Cordelia. 14 years earlier, Cordelia had rewritten her will. She skipped my mother entirely, skipped my father, left the estate, the house, the foundation, the library directly to me, and after me to Ivy. My mother had married into the Boyd family at 22, pregnant and panicking. She'd raised 2 daughters in that house. She'd hosted 31 Christmases, and Cordelia's will said, in the gentlest legal language money could buy, that Margaret Boyd was not considered a real Boyd. That wound never healed. It just grew teeth. 3 months before we left for the camping trip, my brother-in-law Brent posted anonymously on a rare book forum asking if anyone knew a Manhattan dealer for early 20th century children's literature first editions. I saw the post. I recognized his screen name. I thought it was a coincidence. That was my first mistake. Every Saturday, I drove Ivy 40 minutes from our apartment in Brattleboro to the family house in Whitfield. My parents lived there full-time. They had for 3 decades. We visited the library. That was the arrangement. Ivy had unrestricted access to the collection, and my parents had the $30,000 annual tax break that came with housing it. Ivy had a routine. She'd walk straight through the front hall without greeting anyone, push open the library door with her hip, and go to the 3rd shelf on the south wall. That's where the green leather wind in the willows lived. She'd pull it down with both hands, always both hands, even though the book weighed less than a pound, carry it to the mahogany reading chair by the window, and sit down. The chair was enormous on her. Her feet dangled 6 in off the floor. She'd crack the front cover, find the book plate, and trace Cordelia's handwriting with her index finger. For Ivy, who will keep them safe before she reads a single word. Same book, same chair, same ritual. Every Saturday for 3 years, one afternoon, she told me the book smelled like rain and old wood. I told her it was the binding adhesive deteriorating and the foxing on the end papers. She said she preferred her version. I said that was fair. The week before we left for the camping trip, Cordelia's voice came back to me the way it sometimes does. Not a memory, more like a sentence that arrives without permission. The books are Ivy's birthright. Don't let anyone forget. I thought about calling my mother and saying something firm, something about the Reddit post, about the measuring tape Brent had been running along the East Wing baseboard at Easter while he thought nobody was watching. I didn't call. I told myself it was professional restraint. It was cowardice. The two look identical until the shelves are empty. The Whitfield Research Library runs a 9-day staff retreat every March at a camp near Lake Willoughby in the Northeast Kingdom. I'd been attending since my 2nd year as head archivist. This year I brought Ivy. She packed 4 paperbacks from the public library, a sketchbook, and a pencil case with 62 billions pencils sharpened to identical points. She did not bring any of the rare books. She never removed them from the library. That was part of the stewardship Cordelia had taught her. You visit the books. You don't relocate them. You are the one who travels. My mother offered to check on the house while we were gone. Water the plants, bring in the mail, make sure the furnace pilot didn't go out. I said that would be wonderful. She texted the night we left. Have fun, sweetie. We've got things handled here. I read that message 3 times, sitting on a fallen birch log beside the lake, watching Ivy roast a marshmallow that was already past saving. Something about the phrasing nagged at me. Things handled. Not the house looks fine or we'll keep an eye on everything. Things handled like a task list with a check mark, not a favor in progress. I told myself I was overanalyzing a text message. My profession is overanalyzing documents. Attribution, provenance, the difference between what a sentence says and what the person writing means. Sometimes a text is just a text. That was my second mistake. We spent 9 days without cell service. Ivy finished all 4 paperbacks by day 5 and started filling the sketchbook with birds she spotted from the dock. On the 7th night, lying in her sleeping bag with the flashlight still on, she said something I've thought about every day since. Mom, I think Great would have liked this lake. I cried into my pillow after she fell asleep. My daughter talked about a woman who'd been dead for 2 years the way most children talk about someone they'd seen yesterday afternoon. We drove home on a Thursday, 9 days without a proper shower, 1 completed sketchbook, and a sunburn across my left forearm from the canoe. I told Ivy we'd stop at the family house on the way back to Brattleboro so she could pick up the wind in the willows for bedtime reading. She said, "Okay." Without looking up from a sketch of a common loon, she was shading with the last of her 2B pencils. The drive from Lake Willoughby to Whitfield takes about 2 hours through the Green Mountains. I use the silence to mentally catalog what needs filing at work, what conservation grants are due, what forms need signatures. When we pulled into the driveway at 4:15 in the afternoon, the porch light was on. The mail was stacked against the front door. 5 days' worth, maybe 6. My parents' car was not in the driveway. I texted my mother. No response. I texted my father. Nothing. I used the spare key from under the 3rd flagstone, the one Cordelia had put there in 1974, and no one had ever moved. The house was clean, unusually clean. Vacuum tracks on the hallway runner, fresh and parallel. A vanilla-scented candle burning on the kitchen counter. The candle my mother only lights when she's trying to mask another smell. I walk toward the east wing. The hallway is 11 steps. I know because I've been counting them since I was 4 years old. And when you grow up in a house with a library, counting becomes a reflex. The library door was open. The overhead fluorescent light was on. Cordelia had insisted on table lamps only. Overhead light degrades bindings over decades. Someone had flipped the switch and walked away from it. I stepped inside. The room smelled like dust and vanilla. Not paper, not leather, not beeswax polish. The shelves were empty. I counted them. I don't know why that was my first instinct, but it was the archivist in me, I suppose, needing to quantify before I could grieve. Shelf A1 through L17, 217 slots, every one of them bare. Dust outlines where the spines had been. Faint rectangles of darker wood preserved by decades of shade. The mahogany reading chair sat by the south window, exactly where it had always been. But the light falling across its cushion looked wrong. Too bright, too uninterrupted. No books on the shelves to break the glare. On the seat cushion was a folded invoice. Howard & Sons Rare Books Manhattan, dated 5 days earlier. Total $165,000. Seller Richard Boyd. I picked it up. My hands were shaking, so I set it on the arm of the chair and read it flat. My father had initiated every page. My mother had witnessed it on page 4. The transaction included full photographic documentation, provenance verification, and a certified check deposited into their joint account at Granite State Savings. $165,000 for 217 books that did not belong to them. She looked past me at the shelves the way you look at a room in a dream, recognizing the shape of it, but not the emptiness. I stepped sideways to block her view. "Honey, go back to the car, please." She didn't move. Her eyes found the third shelf on the south wall, the slot where the green leather wind in the willows had lived for 11 years. Then she turned around and walked back down the hallway. She didn't cry. She didn't ask a question. 10 years old, and she knew before I said a single word. I sat in the reading chair. The cushion was cold. I did not cry either. I was already counting other things, invoices, deeds, dates, and the number of days it would take to get every book back on every shelf. My parents came home at 7 that evening carrying a bag from a spa in Stowe and a bottle of wine from a vineyard on Route 100. My mother was wearing new earrings, small gold hoops I'd never seen before. My father was humming something. They walked in smiling. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my hands folded, and the invoice from Howard & Sons underneath my left palm. Ivy was in the living room with her sketchbook, drawing nothing. "Mom, where are the books?" My mother set the spa bag on the counter. She tilted her head the way she does when she's about to explain something she considers too obvious for discussion. "Oh, sweetie. They were just collecting dust in that creepy old room. Brent found such a nice dealer in New York. We did everyone a favor." She said it with the satisfied calm of a woman who believed she'd solved a problem nobody else had the courage to address. "Vanessa's boys are going to have the most incredible home theater. We even got a popcorn machine, the professional kind, like at a real cinema." My father uncorked the wine. "Honey, those books weren't doing anyone any good just sitting in there." I looked at him. "Did you read the inscription inside any of them?" My mother waved her hand. Cordelia's little notes. "Sweetie, she's been gone 3 years. It's time to live in the present." I looked at the wine glass my father was filling. I looked at the spa bag. I estimated the cost of my mother's new earrings against the balance of $160, $5,000 minus a home theater installation, and a popcorn machine shaped like a fire hydrant. Then I stood up. "Thank you for dinner." I walked to the living room, picked up Ivy's jacket, and said, "Let's go, honey." We drove home in the dark. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam the door. I closed it the way you close a book you intend to come back to. The drive from Whitfield to Brattleboro takes 40 minutes on Route 9. Evie fell asleep before the second exit ramp. She woke up at the 5th, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. "Mom, did Grandma sell them?" "Yes, honey." She was quiet. I watched the dashboard clock because it was the only light in the car and I couldn't stop tracking things. 4 minutes of silence. Then, did she sell the green one? "I think so, but I'm going to find them. All of them. All of them, okay." She turned toward the window and pressed her forehead against the glass. "I have signed payroll authorizations for 14 employees. I have signed preservation grants worth 6 figures. I have signed sympathy cards at 3 funerals where I meant every word. I have never held a single syllable as heavy as that one. Okay, it carried everything she couldn't say at 10 years old. Trust and grief and a question she was too proud to ask out loud. Can you really bring them back? I drove the remaining 30 miles in silence, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on the manila folder of foundation documents I'd pulled from the filing cabinet before leaving the house. My mother hadn't noticed me taking it. She'd been too busy describing the popcorn machine's butter-warming feature. If you've ever told your child a promise you weren't sure you could keep, and then spent the next 30 miles in silence figuring out exactly how to keep it anyway, drop a comment with the word binder. Stick with me. I want you to see what happens when a quiet woman opens one. Subscribe so the rest of this story finds you. That night, after Ivy fell asleep clutching a library paperback instead of a first edition, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder. Inside was a document I hadn't read in 4 years. A permanent loan deed, 22 pages, 3 signatures, and 1 clause that was about to cost my parents everything they owned. 3 in the morning, Ivy asleep down the hall, kitchen table covered in documents. I had the foundation charter open on my laptop, the PDF I'd saved to my drive in 2010, the year Cordelia signed the original deed. Next to the laptop, a print out of IRS Publication 561 on qualified appraisals and recapture provisions. Next to that, the Howren and Sons website features a tasteful photo of David Howren standing before a wall of calfskin spines with his arms crossed, and the expression of a man who has spent 40 years handling objects that outlive their owners. 40 meters north, the mahogany reading chair sat empty in the East Wing library. I could feel its absence. I know that sounds irrational for a woman who catalogs provenance records for a living, but that chair had held 4 generations of Boyd women reading aloud to their daughters. It was the only piece of furniture in the house that mattered, and it was sitting in a room that no longer had any reason to exist. I opened the permanent loan deed. 22 pages notarized by the state of Vermont, filed with the Secretary of State's office bearing the foundation seal, and 3 signatures. Cordelia Boyd, Evelyn Marsh, and Nathan Pell, Foundation Counsel. Section 4. Described the collection. Section 5. Described the conditions. Section 6 named the beneficiary Ivy Boyd, age 6 at time of amendment, with lifetime access and veto authority over any disposition. Section 7 was titled Recapture. I read it twice, then a third time, because the numbers were large enough to require a verification. Any unauthorized disposition of the collection by any party other than the named beneficiary shall constitute a recapture event, triggering full back tax assessment for all years of conditional exemption with statutory interest and 75% penalty. I picked up my phone and composed an email to Evelyn Marsh, Foundation Chair. Subject line, permanent loan breach. Call me at 7. 3 sentences in the body. I hit send at 3:19 and did not sleep for the rest of the night. Evelyn called at 6:58. She did not say good morning. She said, "Danielle, what happened?" I told her in under 4 minutes. She listened without interrupting. Evelyn had been Cordelia's closest friend for 42 years and the Foundation's chair since its incorporation. She did not waste words. She did not comfort me. When I finished, she was quiet for 6 seconds. Then she said, "Pull up the deed, Section 7. I already have it open." "Good. Read me the recapture provision." I read it aloud the way I read everything, evenly without emphasis, letting the language carry its own weight. When I finished, Evelyn said, "Your parents owe the IRS roughly $412,000, back taxes from $12,010 interest, plus the 75 position of conditionally exempt property. They lose conditional exemption going forward. That the town of Whitfield will now assess at full market value, and because the exemption was tied to inside preservation, the IRS will place a federal tax lien on the property for the full amount owed. Between the lien, the back taxes, and the new annual assessment, keeping the house becomes financially impossible. They'll have to sell it to cover what they owe. And the book's foundation property. We have first right of clawback under Section 9. If Howren cooperates, he refunds and returns. If he doesn't, Nathan files in federal court by Friday. I wrote everything down on a yellow legal pad, not the laptop. Paper doesn't crash, and paper doesn't sync to a cloud my mother might access through my father's shared account. Evelyn was the only person alive who could say $400,000 the way other people say pass the salt. She gave me the numbers, the deadlines, and the next 3 steps. That was better than sympathy. I called Howren and Sons from the parking lot of the Whitfield Library. A receptionist transferred me. David Howren picked up on the second ring. His voice was measured and unhurried, the voice of a man who has spent 4 decades handling objects worth more than automobiles and has learned never to sound surprised. Mr. Howren, my name is Danielle Boyd. I'm the vice chair of the Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation. You recently purchased 217 items from my parents, Richard and Margaret Boyd. A brief pause. Yes, Richard Boyd brought a full inventory, tagged, appraised, paid out last Tuesday. We completed the transaction in person at the family residence. Have any been resold? Not yet. We catalog before listing. Standard practice for a collection of this quality. We're still photographing the Rackham plates. Mr. Howren, those items are on permanent loan from a 501c3 foundation. They are foundation property, not personal assets. Section 7 of the permanent loan deed triggers a clawback provision at unauthorized disposition. I'm formally requesting a return. Silence. 4 seconds. I counted because I count everything now, Ms. Boyd. I'd like to see that deed. I'll be in Manhattan by 6 this evening with the original. Another pause. 2 seconds. Drive safely. I hung up and sat in the parking lot with the engine running. My hands were steady. 14 years of handling irreplaceable documents teaches you something useful. The most important phone call of your life should sound exactly like every other phone call you've ever made. No tremor in the voice. No urgency in the phrasing. State the facts. Name the mechanism. Offer the evidence. Let the other person. I pulled out of the lot and drove home to pick up Ivy. I wasn't going to leave my daughter in Brattleboro while I drove to Manhattan. She was coming with me. She was going to see her books and she was going to watch her mother get them back. Interstate 91 South, 4 hours and 40 minutes to Manhattan. Ivy sat in the back seat with a paperback copy of A Wrinkle, in time from the Brattleboro Public Library. The permanent loan deed sat in a manila envelope on the passenger seat, 22 pages that weighed less than a sandwich and more than anything else in the car. Somewhere past the Massachusetts border, Ivy looked up from her book. Mom, what's clawback? It's when something goes back to its real owner. Like dogs. Sometimes like dogs. She considered this for a moment. Mom, why didn't you tell Grandma about the foundation thing before she sold the books? Because I thought if I never said it out loud, she'd never do anything that made me have to. That's not very smart. No, honey, it wasn't. That was the first time in her life my daughter told me I wasn't smart. And the first time I agreed with her, I'd spent 7 years avoiding confrontation with my mother. 7 years of burying myself in manuscripts and conservation grants and catalog entries because paper doesn't argue back. Doesn't give you the silent treatment for 6 weeks. Doesn't tell you you're being ungrateful for protecting what a dead woman left your daughter. Professional isolation. That's the polite name for what I had. The real name is cowardice. Dressed in a cardigan and archival gloves. Cordelia's voice again arriving the way it does. The books are Ivy's birthright. Don't let anyone forget. I hadn't forgotten. I'd just been too quiet about remembering. Somewhere around Hartford, Ivy fell asleep with the paperback open on her chest, page 162, face down against her collar. I drove the remaining 2 hours listening to the highway and thinking about the word stewardship. Cordelia used it the way other people use the word love, carefully, specifically, and only when she meant it. I was 34 and just beginning to understand what it cost. Howren and Sons occupied the second floor of a narrow brownstone on East 61st Street. Mahogany panels, brass reading lamps, gallery lighting angled to flatter leather spines. David Howren met us at the door. 63, silver-haired, reading glasses on a tortoise-shell chain with a handshake that told you he'd been appraising first editions longer than I'd been alive. He looked at Ivy. She's welcome, I said. She's the beneficiary. He nodded once and led us downstairs to the cataloging room. Climate-controlled, 68-degree, 45% humidity. I knew without asking because those are the numbers every rare book professional carries in their head, the way paramedics carry blood pressure ranges. 217 books were arranged across 5 long tables under soft overhead light. Each volume had a yellow sticky note with a temporary catalog number written in Howren's careful hand. He walked us along the tables without speaking. Ivy found it on table 3, the green leather wind in the willows. She picked it up with both hands, always both hands, and opened it to page 47. Mom, my pencil mark is still here. She'd made a tiny 2 billions line in the margin 18 months ago, marking the spot where mole first meets rat by the riverbank. Howren, standing 2 feet behind her, said quietly, "Yes, I noticed that when we were cataloging I left it." Ivy turned to the front cover, found the book plate, traced Cordelia's handwriting with her index finger for Ivy, who will keep them safe. She closed the book and pressed it against her chest with both arms. She did not ask if she could take it. She just held it. Howren looked at me. Every single one has a book plate. Hand-inscribed individual dedication to your daughter. That level of personalization is unusual. Miss Boyd, your father didn't mention any of this when he brought them in. I know he didn't. I placed the deed on the cataloging table. Howard sat down, put on his glasses and read for 11 minutes. I know because Ivy counted the pages, and I counted the clock on the wall behind his head. Neither of us spoke. When he finished, he removed his glasses, set them beside the deed, and said, Miss Boyd, I purchased stolen foundation property. Not stolen, I said. Sold by people who didn't legally own it. There's a difference for you. There isn't one for my parents. He stood, walked to a gray steel filing cabinet behind the cataloging desk, and pulled out the purchase contract. 4 pages. My father's driver's license photocopy on page 1. My mother's signature as witness on page 4. An itemized inventory with a Polaroid of every book valued above $5,000 on page 3, and in each Polaroid visible in the lower left corner of the open front cover, Cordelia's bookplate. For Ivy, who will keep them safe, photographed, documented, sitting in Howard's professional records. He turned to the inventory sheets and tapped the page. Every book still had the original gift receipt tucked inside the front cover. The receipts Cordelia had placed there herself in 2010 when the permanent loan was formalized. Each one read, Permanent loan from the Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation, not for sale. Removal triggers recapture event under deed section 7. My father had signed the purchase contract without reading the gift receipts, or he'd read them and signed anyway. I still don't know which is worse. Howard slid the entire file across the table with both hands. Purchase contract, inventory sheets, Polaroids, gift receipts, 3 centimeters of paper documenting my parents' $165,000 mistake. I'll hold the books here. He said after that on your written authorization. I said I want the IRS to issue the subpoena before shipment so the chain of custody stays unbroken. He looked at me the way one archivist looks at another, when they realize they've been speaking the same language all along. Smart. I drove home that night with 3 centimeters of paper on the passenger seat and a sleeping 10-year-old who somewhere around the Connecticut border whispered the word mine without opening her eyes. The voicemail started the next morning. 7:42. Vanessa, Danny. Mom called me sobbing. Whatever you're planning, stop it. Tyler is so excited about the theater room. He is a child. You're going to ruin Christmas over a bunch of old books. Call me back now. 8:14. My mother. Honey, I know you're upset, but we need to talk about this like adults. Don't make it bigger than it is. 901. A text from Brent. You know you're being real about this, right? No apostrophe, no period. I screenshot all 3 and forwarded them to Evelyn. She replied in 40 seconds. Document everything. Don't engage. I spent the morning at the Whitfield Library doing exactly what I do every weekday, cataloging, preserving, filing. The only difference was that between entries I was also drafting a personal affidavit describing the discovery, the Howard invoice, my mother's admission at dinner, and the visit to Manhattan. Nathan Pell, the Foundation's pro bono counsel, was meeting me at 2. Nathan had been Cordelia's lawyer for 11 years. He had drafted the original deed clause by clause, arguing with Cordelia over commas at midnight and losing every time. He knew the document because he'd built it. At 2:15, sitting across from him in his office above the Brattleboro post office, I slid my affidavit and the Howard file across his desk. He read it the way lawyers read, methodically, pen in hand, small, illegible notes in the margins. When he finished, he looked up. How do you want to handle this? I want the books returned. I want the IRS notified, and I want my parents to understand what they've done in a room full of people with the deed in their hands. He wrote something on his legal pad. When my sister is throwing a home theater unveiling party next Saturday, 30 guests, he set his pen down. That'll do. Tuesday afternoon. Emergency Zoom with the Foundation Board. 5 members on screen. Evelyn Marsh, Chair. Nathan Pell, Counsel. Judge Patricia Holloway, retired Montpelier, a rare book dealer from Boston named Gerald Fisk, and Dr. Catherine Adler, History Chair at Marbury College. I presented the facts, deed, purchase contract, Howard's photographs, gift receipts, and written confirmation of Howard's cooperation. The vote was unanimous on all 5 motions. 1. Authorize the clawback letter to Howard, a formality. He was already cooperating. 2. Authorize the IRS Form 83 amendment and Form 990 supplemental disclosure reporting the unauthorized disposition of conditionally exempt property. 3. Authorized the Heritage Trust referral and conditional exemption of taxes with a copy to the Whitfield Town Assessor for property revaluation. 4. Authorized cease and desist letters to Richard and Margaret Boyd. 5. Authorized public reading of the permanent loan deed at any venue I chose. Evelyn delivered the fifth motion plainly. Danielle, as vice chair and as Ivy's mother, you have unilateral discretion on this. Choose your venue. They're throwing a home theater on Saturday, 30 guests, the Reeves family's new surround sound system paid for with my daughter's inheritance. Evelyn paused. The Boston dealer shook his head slowly, the way people do when they're watching someone walk toward a trap they've built themselves. That'll do, Evelyn said. Before we disconnected, she added one thing. She quoted Cordelia, not from the deed, but from a conversation in 2019, 2 years before Cordelia died. The books are Ivy's birthright. Don't let anyone forget. She looked directly into the camera. I'd say this counts as remembering. I closed my laptop and sat in the silence of the rare bookroom. The filings were drafted, the votes were recorded. All that remained was Saturday and 30 people who had no idea what they were about to witness. Wednesday afternoon, 4, my phone rang at the library reference desk. And Miss Carrington, Ivy's school counselor. She kept her voice neutral, the measured tone school professionals use when they've been debating whether to call. Danielle, I wanted to let you know Ivy hasn't participated in silent reading hour for 3 consecutive days. She puts her book face down on her desk and stares out the window for the full 30 minutes. That has never happened before. I closed my eyes. Her great-grandmother's book collection was sold last week without her knowledge or consent. She's processing a loss. Oh! A pause long enough that I could hear the hallway behind her. Oh, Danielle, I'm so sorry. She doesn't need a formal referral yet. I'm working on getting the books returned. She knows, but if she wants to talk about it in her own time, please just listen. That evening I made macaroni and cheese from a blue cardboard box because some nights parenting means showing up, not performing. Ivy sat at the kitchen table pushing noodles in a figure 8 across her plate. Honey, the books are safe? I saw them 2 days ago. They're coming home in 3 weeks. All 217. All 217, including the green one. Set her fork down, looked at me with an expression I'd only seen once before. The morning I told her Cordelia had died. Mom, can Grandma still visit? I think it's going to be a while, honey. She picked up the fork again. Okay, I figured. 3 words. The vocabulary of a 10-year-old who has already learned that the people who should protect your things are sometimes the people you need protection from. After dinner, I washed the dishes. Ivy sat at the table drawing in her sketchbook. She was drawing bookshelves, full ones, row after row of tiny spines, each with a small rectangle on the cover that I realized when I leaned closer was a bookplate. Nathan Pell worked Thursday and Friday with the precision of a man who had spent 11 years preparing for exactly this. He drafted 3 letters in parallel, each one a different instrument aimed at a different pressure point. The first was a cease and desist address to Richard and Margaret Boyd, citing the permanent loan deed, the unauthorized sale, and the Foundation's intention to pursue all available remedies, including federal and state recapture. The second was the IRS Form 8283 amendment, and supplemental disclosure filed to the Estate and Gift Tax Unit in Ogden, Utah, with a carbon copy to the Vermont Department of Taxes, formally reporting the unauthorized disposition of conditionally exempt property under the Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation. The third was the Heritage Trust Conditional Exemption Recapture Notice, directed to the Vermont State Assessor's Office with a copy to the Whitfield Town Clerk for immediate property revaluation. All 3 letters were printed, signed, and sealed into certified envelopes scheduled for hand delivery on Friday at 5 in the afternoon. I asked Nathan why 5 on a Friday. Because banks close at 4. Because no judge issues a temporary restraining order over a weekend. Because your parents will spend Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon calling every attorney in Bennington County, and none of them will pick up until Monday. I said Cordelia would have loved you. He said he'd had the pleasure of being her counsel for 11 years, and that she once telephoned him at midnight to argue about a semicolon in the deed's preamble. She won the semicolon argument, he said. She won every punctuation argument we ever had. Thursday evening I laid out Ivy's clothes for Saturday, the navy dress she'd worn to Cordelia's memorial service, clean shoes. I laid out my own cardigan, dark jeans, boots, and on the dresser, Cordelia's pearls, ivory-toned, slightly irregular, with a small gold clasp engraved with the letter C. the only piece of jewelry Cordelia kept when she sold the goldsmith business in 1981. I hadn't worn them since her funeral. I set them on the wood and looked at them for a long time. Friday, 5:02 in the afternoon. I was sitting at my desk in the Whitfield Library rare book room with my phone face up on the blotter, volume off, screen bright. Nathan texted at 5:02. Both packages hand-delivered. Both packages hand-delivered. Signed for by Margaret Boyd. I set the phone down and waited. 517 missed call Mom. 538 missed call Vanessa. 601 voicemail. For your mother. 501 voyeurs. Parents. Voicemail. Different register, by something harder and more familiar. You are going to ruin Tyler's life. I hope you can sleep tonight. 7 attempts in 76 minutes. I picked up the phone and typed one message to Nathan. See you tomorrow at 3:30? Then I put the phone in my bag, locked the rare book room, and drove home to Brattleboro in the dark. If you've ever sat at a desk and watched a phone light up with the names of people who used to assume you'd always answer, and finally felt the quiet click of choosing not to, drop a comment with the word click. That's the sound of a boundary being set for the first time. Subscribe so you're here for what happens at the home theater party. I had not raised my voice in 11 days. I had not sent a single accusatory text. I had not cried in front of anyone except my pillow. Tomorrow was Saturday. 30 guests, a deed in a briefcase, and a popcorn machine that cost my daughter 217 books. Saturday morning, 10:15. I was in the Whitfield Library reading room drafting a conservation assessment when the front entrance opened and my mother walked in. She was wearing her navy cashmere sweater and earrings I didn't recognize. Not the gold hoops from the spa, a different pair. Her eyes were swollen, but her makeup was impeccable. The combination of a woman who had wept all night and spent 45 minutes making sure the evidence was invisible. "Sweetheart, please. Let's go get coffee. We can work this out between us. Nathan Pell doesn't have to be involved, Mom." Nathan was Cordelia's lawyer for 11 years. He drafted the deed himself. He's been involved since 2010. She shifted her weight, touched her earring. Cordelia was confused at the end. Danielle, she wasn't thinking clearly when she wrote all that. I thought about the mahogany reading chair sitting empty in the east wing 40 meters north of us, and I thought about how my mother had just attempted to rewrite a woman who was more precise at 89 than my mother had been at any age in her life. Cordelia was not confused. Mom, Cordelia was the most precise person I've ever known. She filed every document in triplicate because she knew. She knew that someone in this family would eventually try exactly what you tried. My mother's jaw tightened. The familiar reflex. Honey, they were just collecting dust in that creepy old room. The 4th time she'd said it. Same sentence, same cadence, same conviction. That repetition could make it true. I stood up from my desk. Mom, I'll see you at 4. I'm coming to the party. We canceled it. No, you didn't. Vanessa posted on Facebook yesterday. 31 people said yes. My mother stared at me. I held her gaze without blinking. I'll see you at 4. She turned and left without closing the door behind her. I closed it for her. Gently. I close everything gently now. 2:30 that afternoon. A knock on my apartment door in Brattleboro. Through the peephole, my father, gray cardigan, reading glasses crooked on his nose. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a man whose skeleton had quietly decided to give up half an inch. I opened the door. We stood in the hallway. He didn't come in. Danielle, I signed the contract. I knew what I was signing. I know, Dad, your mother told me Cordelia would have wanted Vanessa's boys to have something nice. I let myself believe it because saying no to your mother for 44 years has been. He stopped, looked at the ceiling, worked his jaw. I'm tired, Danielle. I am just so tired. I leaned against the doorframe. Dad, I appreciate you coming here and saying that, but the IRS doesn't care that you were tired. Will we lose the house? Yes. He was quiet for a long time. The hallway hummed with the building's ventilation system. Then he said something that told me he had known all along, knew the books weren't his to sell, and chose to do it anyway. Cordelia warned me the week before she died. She said, Margaret will try Richie, don't help her. He looked at his shoes. I helped her anyway. He turned toward the stairwell. At the door, he stopped without looking back. Tell Ivy, I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell her anything from you, Dad. When she's ready, she'll come to you herself. That's not something you or I get to manage for her. He nodded. The stairwell door closed behind him. I locked my apartment and noticed my hand was steady on the deadbolt. 11 days ago, it would have been shaking badly enough to need both hands. That steadiness, More than anything Nathan had drafted, or Evelyn had authorized, was how I knew I was ready for 400-315. Ivy was sitting on her bed in the navy dress she'd worn to Cordelia's memorial. My oversized cardigan draped over her narrow shoulders like a shawl. She looked like someone preparing for a ceremony, which in a way she was. "Honey, I'm going to read a document at the party this afternoon. Grandma may cry. You do not have to come. Will the books be there?" "Not yet. But in 3 weeks they'll be back on their shelves. Every single one." She thought about this for 5 seconds, staring at the closet door. "I want to come. Are you sure Cordelia would have come?" I smiled for the first time in 11 days. Cordelia would have come in pearls. "Do you have pearls?" I opened the top drawer of my dresser and lifted out the strand Cordelia had given me when I was 16. Ivory-toned, slightly irregular, with a small gold clasp engraved with the letter C. I put them on in front of the mirror. Ivy watched from the bed. "Mom, you look like a great-gran." "Good." We drove to Vanessa's house in Bennington in a silence that was nothing like the heavy quiet of the ride home 11 days earlier. This was the silence between two people who have agreed on what needs to happen and have nothing left to negotiate. Nathan was meeting us at 3:45. He would be carrying a leather briefcase with a brass clasp. Inside were 15 copies of the permanent loan deed and a certified letter from the IRS estate and gift tax unit acknowledging receipt of the Form 8283 amendment. Ivy sat in the back seat holding a book, not one of Cordelia's, just the public library paperback of A Wrinkle in Time. She read until we turned onto Vanessa's street. Then she closed the book, slipped it into her backpack, and said, "Ready." I said, "Ready." 14 cars in the driveway and along the curb, white streamers on the mailbox, a hand-lettered sign taped to the front door, "Welcome to movie night." Through the front window I could see champagne flutes arranged on a silver tray, my mother's white tablecloth on the dining table, and a banner that read the Reeves Family Theater. Grand opening in Vanessa's handwriting, 28 guests plus family Patricia Mendel from next door, retired 4th-grade teacher. Tom and Cindy Halverson, owners of the hardware store on Main Street. Lorraine Pratt and Susan Whittam from my mother's Wednesday church group. Pastor Mike Whittam. 4 of Brent's co-workers from the HVAC company in their Friday pool. Vanessa's 3 closest friends from the mom group. Tyler and Dylan already planted in the recliners in the theater room, eating popcorn from paper bags. Nathan arrived at 3:46, 1 minute late, carrying the briefcase. We walked up the front path side by side. Brent opened the screen door. He was wearing a new polo and a wide grin that collapsed the instant he registered Nathan's suit and the briefcase.
"Glad you came around." "I haven't, Brent."
He blinked. "Who's the suit?" "Nathan Pell, counsel to the Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation."
"May I speak with Mr. and Mrs. Boyd?" Brent's smile folded like a napkin. My mother materialized from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. She saw Nathan. She saw me. She saw the pearls around my neck, Cordelia's pearls. And something behind her eyes shifted.
"Danielle, please don't do this here. Mom, you canceled the wrong thing. The party isn't the problem."
8 years of pretending Cordelia's wishes were optional. That was the problem. Vanessa from behind her. She was an old woman with too many books. The room turned 30 faces. I kept my voice low. "Could everyone come into the living room, please? There's a document I'd like to read aloud. It will take 4 minutes and then I will leave." The room went quiet. 30 people in a living room, standing against walls, perched on couch arms, leaning in doorways with champagne flutes they'd stopped drinking from. Through the French doors behind them, I could see the home theater, a screen the size of a barn door, 6 leather recliners still wrapped in plastic on the armrests, and the red and yellow popcorn machine humming in the corner. Tyler and Dylan had wandered out of the theater and were standing next to Vanessa, confused and holding half-eaten bags of popcorn. I held the deed, 22 pages, stapled with the foundation seal embossed on page 1. My hands were not shaking. "My name is Danielle Boyd. Most of you know me. I'm Margaret and Richard's older daughter. I'm Ivy's mother." I paused. Let the sentence settle. 11 days ago, my parents sold a rare book collection from the east wing of the family house. They sold it for $165,000 and used the proceeds to build what you see through those doors. They believed the books belonged to them. They did not. I'm going to read aloud the document that explains why it's been a public record at the Vermont Secretary of State's office since January 2010. Danielle, my mother, from the far corner. Her voice was small. Nathan, standing one step behind my right shoulder, said gently, "Mrs. Boyd, please let her finish." I read the preamble, named Cordelia and Boyd, named the Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation, named the collection 217 items of preeminent literary and historical significance, named the beneficiary Ivy Boyd, age 10 at time of event, with lifetime access and sole veto authority over any transfer. Then I turned to page 14. This section is titled Recapture. I read it the way I read everything at work, clearly, evenly, without emphasis. Any unauthorized disposition of the collection by any party other than the named beneficiary, currently Ivy Boyd, shall constitute a recapture event under applicable federal and state tax law, triggering full back tax assessment for all years of conditional exemption from 2010 forward, with statutory interest and 75% penalty. I looked up from the page. My parents sold 217 items last Tuesday for $165,000. I have a copy of this deed for anyone who'd like one. Mr. Pell has 15 copies in his briefcase. The room did not move. This is insane. She is ruining my children's party over a pile of old books. Ivy was standing beside me. Her hand was resting on the strap of her backpack, the one with the wrinkle-in-time paperback and nothing else. She looked at Vanessa and spoke clearly without raising her voice, without rehearsal, because I had not coached her, had not told her to say anything at all. "Aunt Vanessa, you didn't buy the theater, my books did." The room held its breath. I could hear the popcorn machine cycling through the French doors. Tyler, sitting on the arm of the couch with his bag of popcorn, looked at his mother. "Mom!" Vanessa said nothing. I placed my hand on Ivy's shoulder. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She stood exactly where she was. I addressed the room. Tyler and Dylan didn't do anything wrong. They are not part of what comes next. Then I turned to my mother. She was pressed against the far wall, holding a coffee mug with both hands. The blue ceramic one she'd had since I was in high school. The same woman who told me the books were collecting dust. The same woman who said Cordelia was confused at the end. The same woman who sold 217 books inscribed to her own granddaughter and bought a popcorn machine with the change. "Mom!" She looked at me. I kept my voice very low, nearly a whisper. The rest of the room leaned forward. The collection was never theirs to sell. I said it the way I say everything that matters. Softly, without emphasis. The way Cordelia taught me to handle fragile things. I almost smiled, not from satisfaction and not from cruelty, but from the simple, exhausted relief of saying a true sentence out loud in a room full of people who needed to hear it. Every book in that collection was on permanent loan from a tax-exempt foundation. The conditional exemption on the family house was contingent on those books remaining in the East Wing Library, unsold until passed to Ivy. By selling them, my parents triggered a recapture event covering every year of exemption from 2010 through today. As of 5 yesterday afternoon, they owe approximately $412,000 in back taxes and 75% penalty exemption on the house going forward. They lose the conditional exemption on the house going forward. The exemption existed because the books were there. The books are no longer there. The house is no longer exempt. My mother's coffee mug slipped from her right hand. It hit the rug without breaking. Coffee spread in a dark oval across the beige carpet, and she didn't look at it. She was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. The way you stare at a document that says something you were counting on never being written down. My father sat down slowly on the arm of the couch as though his knees had arrived at a conclusion before the rest of him. Then my mother's voice climbed. "You sold us out to strangers, for old books, for a dead woman. Danielle, she is dead. Why are you destroying this family for a dead woman?" Her voice cracked and kept climbing, filling the living room, bouncing off the ceiling and the home theater banner, and the champagne flutes that no one was touching. 3 of the neighbors were holding their phones at waist level. I don't know if they were recording. I hope they were, because what I said next was the truest thing I've ever said to my mother, and I wanted someone besides me to remember it. I'm doing it for the living one standing next to me. Ivy did not speak. She didn't need to. She was already the answer to every question my mother was too afraid to ask. Nathan opened the briefcase and placed 15 copies of the deed on the coffee table next to the untouched champagne. 3 neighbors picked one up. 2 of my mother's church friends took one. Pastor Mike took 2. I spoke to the room one final time. I'm sorry you had to be here for this, the party is over. Then I turned to Vanessa. The home theater was paid for with proceeds from the sale of foundation property. Nathan will be in contact about restitution. Tyler and Dylan may keep the popcorn machine. The screen and audio system will be returned for credit toward what's owed. Vanessa opened her mouth and Nathan said evenly, Mrs. Reeves, the proceeds are fully traceable. We have the bank records. I looked at my mother one last time. She was still standing against the wall. The coffee stain was spreading on the rug at her feet and she hadn't moved. Mom, the IRS line hits the house within 60 days. Between the back taxes and the new assessment, you won't be able to keep it. I'd start looking at options now. Evelyn and I will help with the logistics if you want, or I'll step back entirely. That's up to you. She said nothing. I took Ivy's hand. We walked out the front door, down the 3 porch steps, across the lawn to the car. Nathan followed. The afternoon sun was still high and warm. On the porch, Ivy looked up at me. That was the quietest fight I've ever seen. Those are the only ones worth winning, honey. 21 days later, Howard shipped the collection back in 11 archival crates. Foundation-authorized transport, climate-controlled, fully insured. Evelyn and I met the truck at the family house. Nathan held the chain of custody forms. 2 conservators from the Whitfield Library helped with the unpacking. 6 hours of careful reshelving. Ivy placed each book herself, starting with the Kelmcott Chaucer and the Beatrix Potter letters, working shelf by shelf, checking every book plate against the inventory list. She saved the green leather wind in the willows for last. She carried it with both hands to the south wall, 3rd shelf, and slid it into its place. Then she walked to the mahogany reading chair by the window and sat down. Her feet still didn't touch the floor. She opened the front cover, found the inscription, and traced Cordelia's handwriting with her finger. For Ivy, who will keep them safe, and begin to read. The room smelled like paper again. Evelyn stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. Cordelia would have approved, she said. She would have told you not to drag the crates across the rug, Evelyn. Evelyn laughed. It was the first time anyone had laughed inside that house in a month. Within 60 days, the Foundation Board voted to relocate the entire collection to a dedicated climate-controlled wing at the Whitfield Research Library. Ivy retained full beneficiary access. Evelyn named the wing the Ivy Boyd Reading Room. The mahogany chair came with the books. It sits by the east window now, where the morning light is gentler. 6 months later, my parents sold the family house at auction. After the IRS lien was satisfied, they netted enough to buy a 2-bedroom condo in Bennington. The remaining balance is being paid on an 84-month installment plan, roughly $4,900 a month. My mother has not contacted me. My father sends a card on the 1st of every month. I read them. I have not written back. Maybe in a year, maybe 2, maybe never. That's allowed. Vanessa returned the theater equipment for store credit. She and Brent kept the popcorn machine. We don't speak. Tyler started 4th grade and, according to a mutual acquaintance, asked his teacher what a foundation is. I hope someone gives him an honest answer someday. Ivy is back at silent reading hour. She's halfway through The Once and Future King, Cordelia's 1958 first U.S. printing. Every Saturday morning in the Ivy Boyd Reading Room, she sits in the mahogany chair that traveled with the books. Feet still not touching the floor, tracing the bookplate before she starts. Setting a boundary with the people who raised you doesn't mean you stopped loving them. It means you finally learned how to love the people they tried to take from instead. That's my story. 217 books, 1 10-year-old, and a 4-minute reading in a living room. If this story reminded you that quiet protection is louder than any argument, take that as a sign. Tell someone you love what belongs to them and write it down. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.